In our series, The World After Coronavirus, today we speak to Dr. Adil Haider. Dr. Haider is the Dean of the Medical School at the Aga Khan University in Pakistan. And we're going to ask him what a post-COVID world might look like for global emergency care.
For those of us in the trauma world and many of our colleagues in the emergency medicine world, we always think about disasters, but never has anyone thought of such a large scale disaster. So if you think about it, that you have a plane crash somewhere and there's a disaster tent outside and there's an emergency that lasts for 24 hours, 48 hours, there's lots of activity in the hospital and so on. But here it's not one hospital. It's like almost all hospitals. And there is a new realization that all this disaster management and preparedness, we thought it was going to be localized and you could get resources and help from other places. Now it's every place is doing it themselves. So this mass disaster response has never ever been seen. What we have learned is that the investments in disaster preparedness have definitely paid off so that people knew what to do. So we didn't do a lot with telemedicine, even at my institution, which is regarded as or advanced for this part of the world. But all of a sudden, overnight, we realized how much we needed and how much can be done by telemedicine. So all of a sudden, we saw our clinics run dry. Everybody was afraid to come in the hospital. So overnight, we basically started doing teleclinics. We started doing them over the phone. In a day or two, we were able to get cameras everywhere. And then we realized we didn't even need to do that because most people didn't have cameras at home, but they had cell phones with WhatsApp. So we started doing teleclinics using WhatsApp, especially for the emergency department, because a lot of people were afraid to come to the emergency department, and we're able to do really good triage of people using cell phones and WhatsApp. I've always wished that there was a time when I was in the emergency department where you could have a video feed in the ambulance, for example. Suppose, so I'm a trauma surgeon, suppose somebody gets shot. Why is it can't the paramedic have that? And I can see the patient, for the 15, 16 minutes before they're actually coming in when the ambulance is rolling to the hospital. We still hadn't built that technology. But all of a sudden, this pandemic has made that happen overnight.
So sitting in Karachi, what have we learned about health systems?
In a fragile health system that is chronically underfunded, this kind of a pandemic obviously will have a much bigger impact. It will have a bigger impact not only for those who suffered the disease, but even worse, I think, for people who have other problems and other diseases and either can't access care because everything is now diverted towards the COVID response, or that they get caught up in the worst situation. Now they have the COVID on top of it, and so they kind of get a double whammy. So it means a lot for systems like ours. I'll give you a simple example. The other day, it was decided that most of the intensive care units would be reserved and kept for patients who have COVID. That's great. But before we had COVID, we didn't have enough ICUs. And so now all of a sudden, what are we going to do and how are we going to deal with it? I think globalization will re-emerge as a phenomena of this pandemic, and we'll have more and more people interested in how to strengthen these kinds of health systems. And I think countries like Pakistan and others will realize that along with defense spending, this is also going to be hopefully thought in the same direction, that for your own national security, it's important to have a stronger health system, because without that, you can't have an economy. Unless you have people, you can't really have an economy. I mean, we know what we need in these health systems. It's just a matter of going and building them.
What do you think your colleagues on the front line and your students right now who are going through this, what do you think they will remember of this moment the most?
The most memorable moments, I think, is God forbid you have to say no. So when we have patients who are outside our emergency department, and when we have patients, when there are too many, and you have to say, look, we're full inside and we can't help you. That's not something that we're used to having to do. If all your life you've only tried to take care of people, the day, the moment, the time you had to say no to somebody and turn them back, that will, I think, be one of the most significant things that people will remember. Hopefully on the good side, we're going to remember the successes that we had in that we were able to turn around places which have very little capacity very rapidly. There are patients who are being saved. And even in our context, we've had some really significant successes.